Yeah, it's not a very good team. I mean, you have to be concerned with the defensive line, and Chip kind of talked about that earlier this week. But even that's been lessened by the fact that Cam Wake got injured, so you have the big-time pass rusher's not going to be there. But Ndamukong Suh is still a dominant player when he wants to play, and unfortunately you don't get that effort each and every week, which is a major problem for Miami. But if he shows up on Sunday, it's going to be difficult to block him because when he does show up, he's one of the 2 or 3 best interior linemen in this league. So if there's one aspect where I look at to say, if he decides to show up and play, they're going to have a difficult time with it. Would probably start with the interior of the offensive line because we've talked about it all year, and they've improved their play. There's no question about it. But Jason Kelsey, Alan Barber, Matt Tobin, that's not a good matchup if Ndamukong Suh wants to show up and play at the level he used to play in Detroit.
Bill Lazor's their offensive coordinator, John. Obviously, the Eagles know him well. Does their offense resemble the Philadelphia offense, or has it not been quite as successful as they had hoped down there?
It's not been as successful as they hoped. It's not a lot like the Eagles' offense, really. And Chip talked about that also. It's probably more of what he did at Virginia before he got under Chip Kelly as the quarterback's coach. And there's some parts of it. The read option is in it because Ryan Tannehill's a dual-threat quarterback. He can run the football. He can throw it. But the big thing is, and Lazor talked about it this week, he talked about when he got hired, and he asked Joe Philbin, who was then the head coach who hired him, do you want the tempo aspect of it? And Philbin said basically no, so they took that out of the equation, at least on a full-time basis. And when you take that out of the equation, you're not running what Chip runs.
John McMullen's with us, looking at 5 on the Fins. We'll get some thoughts on the Eagles coming up. Tannehill, big contract, big draft pick. Has he lived up to it?
No, not at all. He's a fantasy football player's dream, as I like to call him, because he's going to put up numbers, and he's going to put up numbers both throwing the football and running the football. But the bottom line, you look at the wins and losses, he's under 500. He's getting paid like an elite quarterback. He's not an elite quarterback. You're going to be intoxicated by his skill set at times, and the Dolphins were certainly in that camp by giving him the long-term extension. And, you know, to be fair, they almost had to because it's so – we talk about it all the time. It's so difficult to find quarterbacks in this league. When you have one that has some success and has the potential to reach higher levels, you almost have to go all in, and they did it. But at some point, you have to get wins and losses on the field. You have to get that going in the right direction. And to this point, he's been very, very mediocre. And if anything, it's pointing the other way this season.
John, what is an underrated aspect of this Dolphins team that the Eagles might be concerned about?
I think the running game with Miller, it's been pretty productive, and people don't realize it. Basically, you know, yards per rush is the second team in the NFL over the past 2 seasons or so behind Seattle. So they've been effective, but it tends to be very, very streaky. He either has a lot of big plays and really gouges you, or he gets nothing. So he's a feast or famine type of runner. But there's always that week where it could be a feast. And if it is that, if you see him cracking 100 yards and you'll see the 40, 50-yard run, the Dolphins will have an opportunity to win this game. But the Eagles have been very, very good against the run, especially when D'Amico Ryans and Benny Logan are on the field at the same time. And it's looking like that's going to happen again this week. Obviously, D'Amico's missed 2 straight games, but he's listed as probable. So I think that bodes well for Philadelphia also.
John, last couple of weeks, 2 tight end, we've heard a lot about it. You had mentioned before, like, you know, not having Huff or Aguilar is actually not a good thing in terms of the depth, but it almost forces them into it. Is it something, though, that they realistically will stay in the rest of the way? I mean, has Chip Kelly almost fallen backwards into something that they are successful at?
Well, I'm interested to see that, and that's what I wrote about a couple weeks ago, because he's been forced into it, and it's worked. But he's been forced into it due to injuries. First Aguilar and also Riley Cooper, playing very, very few reps last week, for instance, after he got banged up. So Aguilar looks like he's in line to play again, and you'll have your full complement of receivers. So I'm very interested. Remember, before the injury started, it was about 90 to 93% of three wide receivers on the field. 11 personnel, which is what Chip Kelly likes to do. That's what he prefers to do. When he switched, he was forced to switch, and the Eagles have been more successful as a team with two tight ends on the field. And it's pretty easy to understand why, because their second tight end, Brent Selleck, is better than their third receiver, whoever that might be, whatever you want to designate it as, Huff or Aguilar or Cooper, however you want to do it. Selleck's a better football player, and I'm interested to see if Chip stays hard-headed and plays that 11 personnel because he's got the people to do it, or if he stays with what's working, and that's 12 with the two tight ends.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. His pick is posted. We'll get to that in just a few. And you wrote a piece over at the website about Jordan Matthews, and really, he's a big key to this team probably moving forward and having success. They're going to have some sort of guy. But as you write, he receiving the message, and really, how important is that message for Jordan Matthews to make sure that he gets it and for this team to move forward?
Well, it's more about the whole receiving corps than what we just talked about, the fact that how much little success they've had. And I talked about over the 118 receivers that have had significant snaps in this, year for the NFL. The Eagles' top guy is ranked 87. So that's how bad it's been. And if you look at all five of them, it's all from 87 to 118. So that's how little these guys have performed. And obviously Jordan Matthews had a very good game in Dallas, and hopefully that spurs him on to better things in the second half. But we'll see. The consistency hasn't been there. That's another interesting part of this game, because Matthews and Landry for the Dolphins are very similar players. They're both high-volume guys, slot receivers who catch a lot of balls, but there's not a lot of effectiveness after they catch the ball. It's 10 or 11 yards to catch. There's drops, and both need to improve for their respective franchises for them to move forward.
Yeah, and Matthews obviously had the big 41-yarder. How about Jason Peters moving forward here? What's the thought process on him? Do they try to sneak another week without him here? Do they activate him but only use him, as a backup if needed? How do you think they use Peters this week, if at all?
Well, I think if he's active, he's going to play. He's just too good of a player. If you're going to dress him, he's going to be the left tackle. The question is, and I get the feeling they think they're a better team in Miami. They can probably get through another week without him. We'll see. Remember, he was listed as questionable last week, and all of a sudden on Saturday they declared him out. Questionable again today. Now, the one thing that differs from last week is he did take some reps in practice, whereas the week before he did not. So he's getting closer, but Lane Johnson has taken the majority of the reps in practice at left tackle. And like I said, I think I get the feeling that the Eagles think they're a better team than Miami, and they think they could probably get away with another week to let Jason Peters rest. But we'll see how it shakes out, because it's very difficult to tell a player of that caliber if he's ready to sit. Basically, if he's ready to dress, he's going to play.
Yeah, and we know that Lane Johnson is capable on the left-hand side, but Dennis Kelly, who held his own last week, he would be the more of the worry on the right-hand side. But the Dolphins, without Wake, what's their pass rush looking like? Sue's a great player against the run, but not as much in the pass rush, where Wake has really been one of the premier players in this league.
Yeah, Wake is one of the best edge pass rushers in the league. And Olivier Vernon's pretty good, too. He's not Cam Wake, but he'll be out there. So they still have something. And that would be the true strength of the team if Cam was still there, because then you have three really good players on the line. The bigger issue, and the reason Joe Philbin isn't the head coach anymore and Kevin Coyle isn't the defensive coordinator, is because he couldn't get those guys to play. I personally kind of hold that against them, the players, because I don't care if you like the coach, you don't like the coach. You got to be a professional in this league, and you got to play for yourself, and you got to play for your teammates. So that kind of rubbed me the wrong way about Sue and Wake and all those guys. But they have played harder with Dan Campbell as the head coach. So it's probably at least a little more difficult now that he's taken over.
All right. Obviously, I don't want to say a must-win, because if you lose, you're still hanging around. But if you want to be taken seriously, these are the kind of games you got to win. They're a 5.5-point favorite. This Dolphins team, John, I didn't realize this until today. 3 in a row on the road. They've played 7 games away from Miami this year because they had a home game that was in London earlier. So this team has been on a space odyssey all year long. They've had their coach fired. It just seems like this is a game that you should get out early and finally play, 4 quarters of football. Is this one of those games for you? Do you feel like Philadelphia, imposes its will finally and, steps on a team for the first time really all season long? Even though they beat New Orleans pretty good, they got off to a slow start in that one too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect the Eagles to play 4 quarters because, as you mentioned, they haven't done it to this point. So I don't see why that would change. But I do think they're good enough. They're improving. They're going in the right direction. That certainly they should be able to handle a team like this in a home game. And remember, it's a South Florida team. It's not going to be horribly cold. It's not like it's December, but it's going to be mid-50s on Sunday in Philadelphia. So add that into the equation. This is a game they have to win. They should win, and they will win. But I don't expect that they're going to dominate or put together 4 quarters. I'm not sure the Eagles are capable of doing that, especially offensively.
All right, so the pick is in. What do you got, John?
I have the Eagles winning 28-20, and I think, if you look around the league and how many games are one-possession games, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be that close, but who knows, maybe a field goal with 6 minutes left or something like that. I think the Eagles win it rather easily for an NFL game, but again, I just can't see this offense putting together 4 quarters to get a 20-point win or something of that nature.
All right, John McMullen has more on this game. Check out McMullen's Eagles coverage at 97.3 ESPN.com. As, of course, the Eagles host the Dolphins. We'll have plenty more on this game on Monday. And don't forget to join John and I every Tuesday live from the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City. Good luck with your Golden Gridiron picks there, Johnny.
Yeah, I got a big comeback week because 6 isn't going to get it done, as I got correct last week.
All right, man. Well, we'll see you Tuesday. We'll talk to you Monday.